Hey everybody, and welcome to the 51st episode of the Foundation First Fitness Show. I'm here with Nick St. Louis, Ottawa. We're in Ottawa, right?
We're in Ottawa.
Ottawa.
Yeah.
Okay. And so basically I'm going to pick his brain today. Probably one of the most interesting topics we'll be discussing. It's one of the most, I would say, revolutionary, which shouldn't be revolutionary, but it is revolutionary.
Right.
It's a new way of thinking. So, you know what? I'm going to let you kind of take the mic a bit. Tell everyone a little bit about yourself, what you do, what you got going on here, and then we'll kind of jump into the foot stuff talk.
Cool. Cold notes. Nick St. Louis. I'm a physiotherapist here in Ottawa. So we're currently in Ottawa's our TFC shop. So kind of minimal barefoot shoe store here in Ottawa. It's connected to our physio and sport med clinic. So we've been here for a little while. We're taking kind of a different approach on both the medical and the physio side in terms of just teach people why they're breaking down and how to improve their own bodies. Instead of, I think the physiotherapy and the medicine model, both of them are kind of they're treating based on old principles and old ways of treating where it's managing disease and not actually teaching people how to be healthy. And so we're trying to kind of switch that around. The footwear part was just a necessary element because people can't buy the shoes that we're recommending them to get in Canada. So by that default, we had to start selling shoes. But for the most part, it's just, education and teaching people how they should be moving, what stops them from being able to move optimally. And so, you start at the feet. It's your contact to the ground. So that's kind of why we started nerding out on feet. And now, it's kind of a deep rabbit hole to go into. And now now that's what mostly, now I'm known as the foot guy. But I think a lot of times, like we talk to people, a foot conversation is really kind of a whole body conversation. And it's kind of an indicator of how well your hips are working. And most people's hips just are super stiff and it's costing them their movement quality. And, it can be back pain, it can be knee pain, it can be foot problems, flat feet, plantar fasciitis, whatever it is. People just the information needs to be simplified and they need to be given actionable advice on what can you change in your environment that's causing these problems to develop and how can you start working on this right now, like tomorrow. Right. And so, that's what we're kind of all about here.
Awesome. Well, I'm really, really interested in getting into the practical stuff because I think that's what everyone really wants to hear. But what got you into the foot? So what made you shift your attention from what everyone else was doing, what everybody else is doing in therapy to looking at the foot? How is it relating to the hip? What got you into that, I guess, rabbit hole?
My feet were messed up. My feet were messed up and I was doing everything. I had stiff, weak feet. I didn't have foot pain, but I knew my feet weren't doing what they were supposed to. I knew my ankles were locked up. I played rugby growing up, spent a lot of time in tight soccer style cleats. I played it back, so we wear kind of lightweight soccer cleats, and my feet were just destroyed. And I did everything we were taught in school to try and fix them. I was like, okay, I got to loosen up my ankles because I can't squat barefoot, and realized very quickly that what we were taught is not what's actually effective, and that improving your feet or improving your hips is really more about taking away the things that cause them problems than it is about adding a bunch of extra shit. And I realized how simple and effective how you can simplify things and be extremely effective with people if you explain it in the right way. And just kind of started experimenting with myself, really. It was like, okay, I have tight, weak feet. I have locked up ankles. I'm just going to work on my own body and see what ends up working. And I went through kind of a bunch of different things, and the things that I landed on that were most effective were some of the simplest things. And so we started working on those kind of things with patients, and then use basically social media as a way to try and get good at explaining this to people.
Which I think you're killing, by the way.
Thank you.
I don't know if anyone notices, but if you guys were to put the credentials down there to get so people can kind of see what your stuff is, but blowing me out of the water.
Cool, man. I appreciate it. Yeah, I do it because I enjoy it. I really don't do it. I wish I could be 100% completely anonymous actually forever, because I'm really not. I'm kind of like an introvert. I just like to think on my own and sort of do my thing without. I'm not doing this for recognition. Put it that way. And so I think the mission is just help people understand their bodies, because the world of health is just. We literally have a health crisis that no one's talking about, and it starts with old, outdated education that people are getting. And so the new people that are coming up, like what I learned in physical therapy school, if I practiced that way, I'd be an extremely ineffective therapist. And that's sad to say, but I think, friends of mine that are in the medical world are facing the same thing. It's like, okay, I learned more about drugs and how drugs interact with each other and what drugs to give for this disease or that disease. And I don't actually learn why the disease is there and how people can prevent the disease from happening. So we're really learning, we're in a sick care system, and we're not learning how to actually teach health, how to stop people from getting injured in the first place with simple advice. We're just learning how to manage the problem after it develops. So it's a very backwards way of doing things. And that's kind of the newest project with the Foot Collective is, the Foot Nerd program that we're launched in 2019 is to train other people and teach them everything we know about feet and hips and movement in general. And, if universities are very slow to adapt and are behind the times and are not being open to changing, then we got to create our own education institute, right? And like the world of where you have limitless information, unlimited access, I think part of the problem is confusion, right? There's so much information. It's hard for people to understand what is good information, what is not good information, and what do I need to do right now to deal with my specific issues.
Right.
And I think this complexity for the sake of complexity or for the sake of having to have someone come see you because they think that you're the guru or know everything is bullshit. And humans aren't designed to break down. So why is everyone breaking down? And I think if you pare that down, it's just we're not learning the simple things that we need to learn to be healthy. So
do you think that humans are more reactive than proactive? And do you think that has an effect on where we're going? For sure.
It's only a problem when it's a problem, right? And there's a lot of metrics that you can test, like for example, movement quality, like the functional movement screen, the FMS. That team has done an amazing job at trying to create an objective screen to see where your movement issues are before injuries happen. Because a lot of times, someone that develops knee pain, 10 years before that, you could have probably identified a movement fault that is fixable fairly easily. There's no hole in their knee cartilage at that point, and you solve that problem, and you literally prevent osteoarthritis. You literally prevent the back pain, the foot problems. This is all preventable stuff. We should be learning this in high school, right? What is more tangible than understanding how to not break down as something to learn in high school? Like, I don't know if there's anything else that would be more worthwhile learning than just the basics of what you should be putting in your mouth, right? What food should you be eating so that you don't become obese or develop type 2 diabetes or wake up every day tired? Like, how much sleep do you need? How should you be moving? Why don't we teach these basic metrics in high school? It's just, you learn calculus and math when you have a supercomputer in your pocket. It's,
useless.
Yeah. So I think we need tangible strategies that aren't super expensive, that can make big changes later on in life. Because what you learn as a kid or what you learn as a young adult can make you age very differently from the way that people think is just normal to age now, right? Like, oh yeah, my knees are grindy, but I'm 50, so that's normal. It's like, it's not normal. It's not supposed to happen.
Right.
And the fact that we just think it's normal in the context that it's common, but it's not how things are supposed to go.
Yeah.
So something needs to change, and we're just starting from the feet. In our seminars, people pay to take a Foot Collective seminar. They think it's going to be all about feet, and it's mostly not about feet. It's mostly about just movement in general. It's mostly about, here's how to tell if your hips are stiff, and here's how to restore mobility there, because that's an important joint to function properly.
Let's go into the hip a bit. Talk to me a bit about the hip. Like, why do you think that the hip is, why do you think the foot relates up to the hip, just so that people at home can kind of get an idea of?
So one of the demos that we do in the seminar is to get people to get them to understand the connection between, the relationship of your hip controls your foot position. There's muscles in your foot that can hold the foot stable once it's put in a good position, but your hip is really, at the end of the day, what puts your foot into alignment, right? The hip bone is connected to the leg bone, is connected to the foot bone. So I think people are looking at flat feet and thinking it's a foot dysfunction, and certainly a lot of people's feet aren't doing what they're supposed to, but a lot of times it's kind of, we started to say your feet is where your posture ends. It's an indicator of what your hips are doing. So if you have flat, meat pancake feet that can't organize themselves or can't stabilize properly, it's usually an indicator that upstream at the hip, something is not happening that should be happening. And when you look at what 2018 modern society looks like for most people, it's very easy to see why people's hips are dysfunctional. We spend most of the time sitting hip and knee at 90 degrees, and we spend way too much time there. And when you accumulate that time, it creates imbalances that start, the human is like a master adaptation machine. If your hip is tight in the front and you can't access the important muscles that stabilize your hip joint, you're just going to adapt and move, taking that stiffness into consideration. And so you layer movement on top of dysfunctional range of motion, and that's really, we're recording and dude likes to knock on the window. I really think your hips control your foot position. if you're having problems with the feet, usually the hips are a big part. And the same people that have problems with the feet are typically the same people that complain of, yeah, my back hurts once in a while. I got tricky knees. It's like, yeah, it's all part of the same package.
I'm going to bring something up because I think it's really interesting. I know that you brought it up when I attended your seminar, orthotics. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on orthotics? Because I know I know that everyone out there has probably heard it before and then had some issue with their foot, went to a doctor, immediately was told you need orthotics. Done. Talk to me a bit about that.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm trying to get better and better at kind of explaining to people, because I'm not against orthotics. Okay. Just like I'm not against you using a crutch if you break your leg. But it's a tool, right? It's a tool that you use, or that you can sometimes use if you're having trouble at your feet, but it's not a solution, right? So the amount of people that are being put in orthotics is absolutely insane. It's kind of like, I live in Ottawa, we're in Ottawa right now, federal government town, everyone has benefits, everyone has money given to them for orthotics every year, so everyone gets them. And the problem with orthotics is most people are having issues at their feet, one, because they have a dysfunctional hip. So if you support the foot artificially, you completely negate any awareness of the fact that the hips there's a problem at the hip. But number two, most people are having issues at their feet because their feet are stiff and they're weak, right? And then it's like, okay, well, why are our feet stiff and weak? They're designed to be strong. But when you spend, I think we can agree on basic premises of, if you don't move a joint, the joint gets stiff.
Right.
If you don't use a muscle, the muscle gets weak.
Right.
So if you spend all day in footwear that supports the arch of your foot and allows little to no movement of all those 33 foot joints that you have in each foot, your foot is going to get stiff and weak. And when your foot is stiff and weak, it loses the ability to support itself against gravity. So if someone comes in, they're having foot pain, they got a stiff and weak foot, and you give them a rigid artificial support, let's look at the foot with a parallel analogy to another part of the body that functions by the same principles, your neck. Okay, if you come in to the clinic and you're like, my neck is killing me, it's painful, and I look at you and it's like, okay, your neck is stiff, and you have zero strength in being able to support your head. I'm not going to put you in a neck brace for the rest of your life. And that's what we're doing with feet. And it's no different, really, right? People would think of the neck brace thing and be like, oh, that's kind of silly to do. That's what we're doing with feet. And so, our solution has been to simplify things. Okay, your foot you've spent your whole life unloaded at the foot. Okay, because if you're standing in shoes that support the arch of your foot. And most of the time, people are spending a lot of time sitting. So you're not loading the foot either way. If you're standing and you're in supportive shoes, the foot's not loaded. If you're sitting, the foot's not loaded. So how would you expect your foot to be able to understand how to organize and hold up the load of your body against gravity? It can't. Right. And so the answer is not more support. The answer is spend less time in support. Load your feet. Work on restoring mobility at your foot. Work on just understand how your body works at a basic level so that you can know, I need to work on my hip because my hip tells my foot what to do, and I need to mobilize and work on my foot, right? Like we was talking about protect, correct, develop. Get rid of the things that cause you the problem in the first place. Then learn how to correct the individual issues. And then you can develop strength, stability, endurance, all that kind of stuff on top of that. But if you don't, a lot of people are not really understanding that there is an issue there. And this is one thing we saw with feet is like, when I started to look at feet more deeply, or more often rather with patients, I realized everyone has a foot dysfunction. Like I think it's probably 1% of patients I see that have functional feet that are doing what they're supposed to. And that's stunning. Especially considering the feet are your foundation, right? If your feet don't work, it's like the foundation of a building. If every building you looked at had a massive crack in the foundation, you'd be like, something's wrong here. No one's talking about this. This is a big problem. So anyway, that was a long-winded answer. But I think orthotics, I'm not against orthotics, but I'm against the way they're being used right now. And I say but this isn't. And we reserve the right to change our mind tomorrow, right? If I'm given better information tomorrow, I'm going to change my mind. And if someone's like, well, you said something different a year ago, it's like, yeah. And I'm glad I did because it means I'm trying to learn and challenge the way I'm viewing things right now. Because at the end of the day, we're just after the truth. What is the best way? How do our feet function best? How do you take normal feet that are super dysfunctional and bring them to functional without creating a dependence for a person to have to come see you, and get there as quickly and as simply with as little time invested as possible? Because at the end of the day, people don't want to spend too much time on their bodies. So it's up to us to kind of find out what's the quickest, simplest way for someone to go from a painful, dysfunctional foot to a functional, robust, resilient foot that's not prone to injury.
Right.
And it's really through education. That's the biggest thing.
And what do you think people that are listening can do? What are 3 to 5 tips that someone can do out there? What should they be doing to improve their foot and hip stability?
Number one is just start spending time barefoot. Like, it's so simple, but every second you spend barefoot and walk around and move barefoot or train barefoot is mobilizing the joints of your foot. It's forcing the muscles of your foot to fire. Now, there are some things you can do to fast track that. For example, $5 lacrosse ball. Take that, roll it on the bottom of your foot, a couple minutes per foot every day.
Right.
Change your footwear, right? The footwear is this really weird one that everyone's got this emotional connection to the shoes they wear. And when you tell them the Nikes they've been wearing their whole life are terrible for their feet, it kind of upsets a lot of people because they're like, how can it be? You know, everyone wears these kind of shoes. Yeah, everyone has messed up feet too. So if you switch to a type of footwear, and I don't tell people what brands or styles to buy, I just say, look for a shoe with these 4 features. It has to be flat. Okay, if you look at most shoes' side profile, they're thicker at the heel than they are at the forefoot, and effectively you're standing on a ramp, which puts your ankle in a weird position, which shifts your center of mass and switches up a bunch of the joints upstream. So find a flat shoe. Find a shoe that's wide at the forefoot. Okay, human feet are designed to be widest at the tips of the toes, and most shoes that you look at are widest at the base of the ball of the big toe. And so that's how people's feet look now because they've been shaped by the shoes you wear. So find a shoe that's wider at the forefoot. We stock some brands in this shop that are better. I think they can still improve quite a bit. We still have a long way to go with footwear. But yeah, flat, wide forefoot, flexible. You should be able to take a shoe and twist it, bend it, do all these different things because if each foot has 33 joints, it's designed to move a ton. So make sure you wear a shoe that allows the freedom of those joints. And then find a shoe that has no cushioning and no arch support. And that for a lot of people is a big obstacle because they've been told their whole lives by footwear companies, you need support, you need cushioning, right? And it's like, well, you don't. And if you have both those things, it's going to take away from what your foot's supposed to do. You know, one thing I always tell people is high-tech shoes, low-tech feet. Okay? We got to go to low-tech shoes, high-tech feet. Because your feet have all the tech they need to function extremely well.
Our bodies have all the tech they need.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's the kind of thing where, it's this very deeply ingrained thing where our addiction to technology or technology in general, we look at something and we're like, oh, that's beneficial, that's helpful. But then we take it to such an extreme that it starts to actually harm our bodies. And backtracking is often hard because people get so stuck in their ways. So it is changing. People are kind of, just the following on TFC social media alone tells you that people are hungry to learn this knowledge. And so we're just trying to put out as good information as we can to help people access good information. So
what kind of tools should they be looking for outside of the lacrosse ball? I know you guys have your TFC beams. What is that like and what's the purpose of that?
Yeah, so for a lot of people, what is balance? Balance is a signal going from your foot because your foot is really just a sensor to feel the ground under you so that you don't stare at the ground the whole time. Balance is your foot sending a signal to your brain then telling your hip muscles how to fire to stop you from falling on your face. And it's this feedback loop. And for a lot of people, one, their hip can't even get in the right position to fire the right muscles. So there's some work to do to open up the hip. Two, their foot has gotten really poor at being a sensor. And so the balance beam essentially gives you a fun, kind of playful tool to be able to work on getting your foot to be better as a sensor, getting your foot to splay over the circular tubing, getting your brain talking to your hip and your foot and integrating everything together. So the beams are just something where, and it's hard to screw up, right? It's like, stand on this beam, don't look down, try not to fall off. People get better very quickly because all it is kind of reinforcing that feedback loop, foot, brain, hip, and it gets better and better and better, which is why, it's always one of those funny things. People are like, oh, I got terrible balance, I'm just clumsy. It's like, well, yeah, because you never worked on it. Right? Or your body's so stiff you can't even get in the right position to stack all your joints to actually recruit these stabilizers. So we got the beams, we got the footwear. Toe spreaders, another big one. They're a simple, almost silly looking accessory, but I think if you spent your whole life in shoes that squish your toes so tightly together that they're jammed up and they actually are unable to splay, then you need something to be able to passively open that up. Unless you want to spend all day with your fingers in between your toes. So simple stuff, inexpensive, easy to use. And so that's really, those are the products it's one of those things where we only sell products if we feel we can sell them at a better price and give better value to people than what's available on the market. Because at the end of the day, selling products is a bit of a pain in the ass. We sell stuff and ship it everywhere. Shipping stuff across the planet is a pain in the butt in itself. But if no one else is selling a product that you think is of value and that you can make better than anyone else for a better price, then it just makes sense to kind of go down that avenue and give people a good experience when they're purchasing something. And the goal is always just give people value.
Right.
So
where can people get all of these things? Where can people access the shoes if they're not in Ottawa? Can people access the beams, the different things? Where do they do that?
It's all at tfc-shop.com.
Okay.
So our main education site is thefootcollective.com. There is a link on there. If you click on shop, it'll bring you to the tfcshop.com. We now have divisions in the US and in Australia, and hopefully soon in the UK. So, what we're learning is when you ship stuff internationally, there's a lot of friction in terms of shipping, in terms of customs and duties and all that kind of stuff. Right. So now our mission is, okay, how do we make this stuff more accessible domestically to people? And, we don't really, if you have access to Vivo Barefoot in the country you live in, then get it from there. We just want people to, the biggest reason we sell footwear here is because people cannot get these types of footwear in Canada. It's very, very hard to find. Really? And you got to buy it from the States, and then you get dinged with huge duties and tariffs usually when the package gets delivered to your door. So it's a big obstacle to people. And selling footwear was more about removing obstacles than anything. In Ottawa, we're giving people a place where they can come and try a bunch of different styles on and feel what a barefoot shoe feels like in terms of very minimal covering to the sole of your foot. And the eventual goal is to have these, every physical TFC store will be primarily a big open movement area, which is why, 3/4 of this unit that we're in is actually a wide open movement area where people can come use beams, can come and work with a physical therapist or a TFC foot nerd and get a better understanding of how their body works. And then the shoe store is just, if you want something to cover your foot, then you have a bunch of options here. Right. But it's really less about the shoes and more about learning and the movement side, because that's really the priority. But footwear is a big part, right? If you learn about your feet and work on your feet, but then you put shoes on every day for 8 hours that are stiffening up your foot and disfiguring your foot and squishing everything together, it's a hard battle to win in the end. So I think, if just your everyday shoe that you wear most frequently is a good shoe for your foot, flat, wide, thin, no support, no cushioning, you're going to be winning the battle, even if you're not doing a whole lot else extra.
Absolutely. So. What social media stuff? Where are you? What's your handles? Where could people find out more?
Yeah, so we have just one main one at the Foot Collective. That's our main kind of platform. I think what we post on Instagram does go to Facebook, although we don't. DMs and Facebook messages, it's just almost too much now. The other day, I went into the Foot Collective DMs, direct messages, and I was like, okay, there's so many of these backed up. I'm just going to try and fire off 100 responses.
I got ghosted.
Yeah, it's not on purpose, man. Hey, I went in there, it says like that little thing in the corner says 99 plus. So I'm like, okay, screw it. I'm going to go in there. I'm going to bang out 100 of these. I answered 100 messages and it still said 99 plus. So I gave up.
Right. Yeah. It's just too hard.
It's too hard. And a lot of people are asking, they're like, oh, my toe hurts, bro. What do I do? It's like, well, I can't really tell you that over this. And this is not a good medium for this. But I think it's important to look at those once in a while because especially now that we have the Auto Project podcast, it's like, okay, what questions are people asking? Is there trends? And then how can we put out a podcast that tries to hit as many of these questions as we can in a more longer format conversation? Because a lot of these issues we talk about, social media is like a little snapshot, right? It's a picture, it's a little bit of text.
It's not much.
It's not much, right? And a lot of these issues are not black and white, simple issues. They're very deep, and there's so many variables with humans that you can't just put out one little thing and expect people to have all the advice they need. So I think podcast, longer format conversations are so much better for people to just get a deeper understanding. And we're just trying to get better and better at what other content avenues can we put out there that resonate with people, that are applicable to people. So like we're going to film our seminar in February, put that online. It's not the full experience like you would get in person because most of it is moving around, but at least it gives, we're just trying different avenues. We're kind of just learning as we go. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, listen, thank you very much for having me here. Thanks for being on the show. I appreciate you taking time out on a Saturday.
Worries, hey, you drove all the way from Montreal. I respect that just for the audio quality. I love it.
Hopefully the audio quality comes out. If it doesn't, that'll be an absolute waste of time.
I'm sure it'll be good.
Appreciate it. Hopefully we can get you back on the show again. And, good luck with everything, man.
Yeah, I'm down. We'll be in Montreal, so I'll get in touch and we can record one there so that you don't have to drive all the way out here again.
All right, guys, listen, if you have any questions about this, let me know, and I'll try to get Nick to answer those as best we can. We're not going to fall into the DM trap this time.
Sorry for ghosting.
But until the next time, guys, keep building that foundation.